So I'd like to introduce our first two speakers. First of all, Dr. Isabel Torres is a science editor and writer with a PhD in genetics and co-founder of the organization Mothers in Science. Dr. Ryan Watkins is someone that our community knows well and is a program scientist at NASA headquarters in the Exploration Science Strategy and Integration Office that brings you clips amongst other things. And she is a planetary scientist with a doctorate at from Washington University at St. Louis. And Dr. Torres and Dr. Watkins are going to be addressing the question, why are mothers in STEM lagging behind a call to action? So I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Greg, for the introduction and for inviting us to be here. It's such a pleasure to have this opportunity to share our mission and our work. And I hope that by the end of our talk, we would have convinced you that parents and caregivers, and particularly mothers, should be a priority in DEI efforts. All right, so why are mothers in STEM lagging behind? And just before we start, STEM, the M means medicine. So we really want to support all fields in science, including social sciences as well. So despite decades of efforts to close the gender gap in STEM, nowadays women still make up only 30% of the workforce in STEM, and even fewer reach leadership positions. And this really depends on countries. Some countries, the representation is even lower. And for women of color and other minorities, these numbers are even worse. So if we look at the leaky STEM pipeline that many of you have heard about, probably all of you, the major exit of women from the workforce really happens after the PhD. And this gender gap increases as women climb the career ladder. And it is no coincidence that this timing overlaps when women are starting to form a family. And despite this very obvious overlap, this timing, there's very little research in STEM as to whether motherhood impacts career progression. The first study that really analyzed this very thoroughly came out last year, well, not last year, into 2019 now. It was a study in the US, and it showed that 40% of mothers leave full-time STEM employment within 3 years of having children. And they looked even after 8 years after having children, this number goes up to 48%. So this is nearly half of mothers leaving full-time STEM employment because they have children. It is huge and it is unacceptable. So why are women, but not men, leaving the workforce because of parenthood? So besides facing challenges for being women, so gender bias and discrimination, which are well known, mothers have additional obstacles to career advancement. And this cartoon is well known, and it shows something that the pandemic exacerbated and really revealed, which is that mothers everywhere in the world are doing up to 3 times more, are spending up to 3 times more time than men on domestic chores and on childcare. So this is a huge difference and a huge burden. So something else that the pandemic made very, very obvious, but which is a problem that existed before and still exists, is lack of childcare. So in our culture, in our society, women are still traditionally the primary carers. So if we don't have childcare, they won't be able to join the workforce after having children. And this is a huge problem anywhere, even in more progressive countries where there is public childcare. Normally, it only starts about when children are 1 year old. So, you know, this initial timing after giving birth, this gap is usually covered by mothers, and fathers go to work. Another problem is unequal parental leaves. I know we are in the US here, and you have another problem, which is no parental leave. So there's another thing. But even again, in more progressive countries, I mean, gender progressive countries in Northern Europe, for example, mothers can have very long parental leaves, which seems like a very good thing, but actually it increases inequalities because fathers will go to work almost immediately after birth, so women will be excluded from the workforce, and it will be harder for them to return to the workforce if they have long leaves. The other problem with unequal parental leaves is that, and research has shown that unequal parental leaves will set the balance at home on how the father and the mother will devote their time to childcare and domestic chores. So if the mother starts off by taking that primary role, this pattern will reproduce, indefinitely. So the mother will continue doing more childcare and more domestic chores. Another problem is salary parity. So there is a study, at least one study that we know, that shows that for each child a woman has, she will suffer a 5% drop in her salary, and this accumulates with children. And this is not the case for men. Actually, fathers quite often receive a salary bonus, and they earn more than childless men. We know that this is partially because mothers will tend to take part-time options if they can, whereas fathers will rarely take part-time jobs. So at the end of their career, gradually, mothers will have penalties and a decrease in their salary and in their earnings. Another problem is bias and discrimination. So maternal bias and discrimination is called maternal wall. It has been shown extensively that mothers are less likely to be promoted, they're less likely to be hired, they are perceived as being less competent, less committed to their work. Quite often, almost always, this is very subtle, and nobody, employers or the mothers themselves, are aware that this is happening, and this is a huge problem. And sometimes this bias is so subtle, and probably everyone here has been through that, not knowingly. Sometimes it's just assumptions. For example, an employee will assume the mother won't be available because she's looking after children, so he won't invite her to networking events or conferences. And sometimes this is even well-intentioned, but it will harm the mother's career. Finally, our work culture, and this is something the pandemic has also revealed, how our work culture is designed for the ideal worker, someone available around the clock, and obviously for parents, this is unrealistic. And academia is particularly bad because it has the work devotion scheme, which is a social science term for this work culture, in which if you're not 100% devoted to your work, so if you're not working weekends and nights and over vacations, then you're not considered passionate or committed to your work, and you'll be excluded, or you will suffer penalties, career penalties as well. And obviously, if you're a parent, you will have less time available to devote to your work, so you will be penalized. And finally, again, the uneven division of domestic chores and childcare, which we know falls mostly on mothers. And all of this, sadly, is still a result of our society and gender norms, and this very obsolete vision that mothers should be primary carers, and they should prioritize family and their spouse over work, and men, they should just focus on work. So why don't we speak about this? Why did it take a pandemic for us to start noticing all these inequities? So one problem is that mothers fear career penalties. So motherhood is still, well, parenthood actually is still seen as a weakness or liability in the workplace. So mothers tend to hide their parenthood, fathers as well. So because mothers hide their motherhood and all these struggles, first we have a lack of role models. So We don't see mother scientists, which is necessary to encourage and inspire younger mother scientists. And there's also a lot of isolation. So all mothers are going through these problems, but we don't talk to each other. So there will be a tendency to blame ourselves. So there is a lack of awareness of structural barriers. So everyone is going through these problems and nobody knows they are there. And also there's the normalization of these social norms. So all of this is very normalized. You know, that a mother is spending a lot more time doing childcare and domestic chores is so normalized that we don't even see these inequities. So all of this results in this blame problem, that mothers are blamed for their struggles in their career. And a lot of initiatives we have to help women succeed in STEM are focused on fixing mothers, you know, in improving work-life balance, or, you know, you have to self-care, or, you know, mentoring or empowerment, or increasing confidence, when the problem really is the system. That's what needs to be fixed. So from the feedback we have from our community of mothers in our organization, you know, we see that mothers are hitting this maternal wall, these invisible barriers, and they don't know it. And we've been through this ourselves. And then there's this tendency for the blame and the guilt, which is not just internal, it's external, largely external. So there's this feeling of not doing enough. So mothers will just tend to do more. So there's a lot of self-improvement and self-sacrifice. So mothers will take more teaching work, or admin work, or science outreach, and they will just try to build up on their CV and work more and more and more, always to try to prove something and to get there. And then they keep on hitting the maternal wall and these invisible barriers, and we continue in this cycle, and this vicious circle, until at some point there's either burnout, or mothers will feel they have to make a choice. So we have to make a choice between career and family, because it's just not possible to do it all. And no, it's not possible to do it all, because we are already doing way too much. And fathers don't have this problem because they don't have these barriers. So this personal choice, when women choose to work part-time, or to reduce their working hours, or to leave and take and work in another sector with a more flexible job, what seems to be a personal choice is actually a forced choice. It's not a choice at all. And it's just a result of the structural and social barriers that push women out of the STEM workforce. So I really like this quote by Dr. Caitlin Collins, and she says, "Mothers don't need balance, they need justice." So in our organization, we really are trying to raise awareness of these issues, raise awareness within the, you know, towards the employers and the mothers themselves, so that we focus on not on fixing mothers, which doesn't work. We've been doing this for decades, and really we need to fix the system, and then really try to think about and brainstorm and think about how should we change our workplace to make it inclusive for parents and caregivers. So at Mothers in Science, we are amplifying the voices of mothers in STEM and helping to create meaningful solutions for change. Our vision is we really want to close the gender gap in STEM and help build a world where nobody has to choose between having a career or a family. And based on our values, we really want to increase retention of women in STEM by supporting mothers, by raising awareness of these challenges, and by advocating for workplace equity and inclusion for parents and caregivers. So we do this we are focused on four main areas. Let's say we started by focusing on building a community to reduce this isolation and to increase role models. So we have more awareness. So we have many projects and actions to support, connect mothers and empower them, so that when mothers face this bias and discrimination, you know, they are empowered to speak up and protect themselves. We also invest a lot in research, and Ryan is going to speak about the results of our first survey, the global survey, to identify these problems. because we really need to, there's very little research on this, so we really need to identify the specific obstacles so we can start informing policy. And once we have this data, which is what we're starting to do now, we need to advocate to change our workplace. And we really need policy change at the level of the government for parental leaves, for example, but also in the workplace to change this inflexible work culture. And we need to normalize parenthood. And finally, we really want to foster collaborations and help other organizations and even institutions, research institutions, help them to support mothers and to make these changes. So before I pass the mic to Ryan, just a brief introduction to our survey. So we ran this survey last year during the pandemic, but the questions were before the pandemic, the situation before the pandemic. And really the aims of this survey was first to raise awareness and start advocating for change, and really to start identifying specific obstacles so that we can start proposing new policies and recommendations to fix the workplace. And also we want to start collecting preliminary data for further research and to encourage the research groups to continue studying these important issues. And it's Ryan's turn now, so.
All right, yep, thanks Isabel. Are you gonna advance to the slides? Okay, great. Yep, so Isabel gave a great intro into mothers in science, and I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to kind of quickly discuss some preliminary results from a global survey that we conducted last year. The aims of this survey were to measure the impact of having children on the scientific productivity and career choices of women in STEM, and to identify the specific obstacles faced by people with children and driving gender imbalance in STEM fields across the world. So this graphic is showing we had a total of almost 9,000 respondents representing 128 countries across the globe. The countries in red here are those that had over 100 respondents. So our highest response rates were from the US, France, Germany, the UK, and Australia. 75% of all of our survey respondents are in academia. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a breakdown of our respondents based on gender and parental status. First, it's important to note that previous studies found that over 75% of faculty in the US and Canada over the age of 40 had children. So most faculty are parents. The overwhelming majority of our respondents did identify as women. We had 3% of our respondents identified as non-binary, but we've not yet included these in our results. So all of the results you're going to see are divided into men and women or mothers and fathers. We had over half of the respondents are mothers, about 13% are fathers, and then the rest are actually childless women and men. The sample is not quite representative. People are experiencing pandemic fatigue, survey fatigue. Men are less likely to take surveys like this because the issues just don't affect them as much. And so the effects of having few childless people, especially men, may affect some of our results. Our results indicated that the mean age at childbirth for fathers is 32, and for mothers it's 31. And the average ages of parenthood in the general US population are 31 for men and 26 for women. This indicates to us that parents in STEM are delaying having children. And I'll reemphasize that these results are preliminary. We're still working through all of the data. Next slide. So we asked our respondents, regardless of their parental status, whether they chose to delay or renounce having children because of their career. While overall more men and women said no, we did find that women are far more likely than men to delay or renounce having children because of their career. Next slide. Importantly, our data showed that 34% of mothers globally leave full-time STEM employment after having children. This data agrees with data from Aaron Keck on US parents that revealed that 42% of mothers leave full-time STEM employment. Most of these mothers go work part-time, change career sectors, lose their job, or become stay-at-home mothers. And the fathers that do leave STEM employment simply just change the career sector but continue to work full-time. Next slide.
2 minutes, Ryan.
Thank you. So we've seen that mothers' careers are affected more so than fathers. And we had two hypotheses. The first being that work productivity in mothers decreases after having or adopting a child, but that fathers' productivity remains unchanged. And the second was that mothers, but not fathers, face bias and discrimination in the workplace. So yeah, we're going to skip through these kind of quickly. Our data do show that when we break down publications per career phase, that after childbirth, fathers are publishing at a higher rate than women, particularly mothers. When you got to get to the 7 to 9, 10 to 12 years post-terminal degree, we see that fathers are actually publishing upwards of almost 10 more papers on average than mothers. Have you skip 2 slides? Let's see, go one more. Our preliminary results also indicate that 40% of mothers are being offered fewer professional opportunities than their male counterparts, compared to 70% of men who are seeing no change at all after having children. Next slide. 34% of women are saying that their competence is questioned after having children and returning from parental leave, whereas 78% of fathers disagree with the statement that their competence is questioned. Next slide. So we found that mothers more strongly agree that the time away from work from parental leave affects the roles and projects they take on at work, as well as their professional credibility. And men are far more likely to disagree with these statements. I'm gonna have you skip 2 slides just so we can kind of get to our conclusions here. Go one more. Yep, so after learning about the challenges and inequalities facing women in STEM, we found that over 60% of women say that motherhood does impact their career. This is nearly double the number of men in our sample. And Isabel, I'll let you run through the conclusions real quick. I know we won't have time to show our video, but we can post that in the chat link. If you want to go to the conclusion side.
I'm just going to conclude quickly. So our data, sorry if Ryan had to go quickly through that, but our data indicates that the maternal wall is widespread in STEM, and we won't have time to show our video. It's a 3-minute video, but Ryan is going to put the link in the chat box. Do watch it, it's 3 minutes, and it really shows how widespread maternal wall is in every sector, in every country in STEM. So another conclusion, motherhood myths and stigma hide structural problems, and this is why we really need to raise awareness. More research is needed to identify specific problems, so our survey didn't cover that, and we hope to do this in the future to see specific problems by country, regions, in specific sectors. We would like to do this in medicine and look at underrepresented groups. So we really need to raise awareness and break stereotypes and normalize parenthood, because most people in the STEM workforce are parents. So we can't just ignore them. So these problems are universal. They affect mostly mothers, but they can be identified and solutions can be created. Just a final slide. If you like our work, please support us by donating, or if you'd like to collaborate or sponsor, please do get in touch. We would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for a really amazing presentation. This is something that we all, men as well as women, need to join together to help solve. It's going to be good for all of us when we move in the right direction. So thank you. And
long-standing inequalities and discrimination against mothers are rampant and unspoken in the STEM sector. It's time to break the silence and take action.
I was accused of showing insufficient passion for my work because of taking parental leave, and had a fellowship terminated as a result.
I was fired on the first day after returning from maternity leave.
Then, not long after, I received an email from this individual saying that they wanted to stop our collaboration completely because he felt it best I, quote unquote, concentrate on motherhood.
I was told directly that I was passed for promotion due to concerns that I would be distracted because I was a single mother.
Over 34% of mothers globally leave full-time STEM employment after having children, and this contributes to the underrepresentation of women in leadership positions. Why? Unlike their male counterparts, women's personal lives are unjustly seeping into their careers without permission or justification.
One boss didn't allow me to take shifts in the ICU after I came back from parental leave, and another fired me after learning that I was pregnant. I was bullied about breast pumping on multiple occasions.
I was told by my advisor at the end of my first year as a doctoral student that, and by the way, she was a woman, I was too pretty and chirpy, her exact words, to be in a doctoral program, and I needed to drop out of the program. And then I needed to get a job and start a family.
Due to this maternal wall, mothers in STEM receive lower salaries, are less likely to be promoted or hired, and are perceived as less competent and committed, all because they have children.
My boss told me I should have mentioned my kids on my CV because he never would have hired me if he had known.
My PhD supervisor was furious when I got pregnant and subsequently took me off the project entirely.
I found out I had an abstract rejected from an international conference while I was on maternity leave because while I was on maternity leave, most of my collaborators had submitted an almost identical abstract to the same conference, and they had accepted that one and not mine.
I was told that being a scientist is a full-time job that is not possible for mothers.
At Mothers in Science, we are amplifying the voices of mothers in STEM as they battle for equal opportunities at work. Join us as we raise awareness of the structural barriers faced by mothers in STEM and create meaningful solutions for change and workplace equity and inclusion.